right, good morning. I just wanted to very quickly reintroduce Dr. Warren. Dr. Garvey did a great job of telling you all his credentials. I just thank you, first of all, for being those proud few that come on Friday morning to do an academic talk. But one thing I would tell you is, so he'll do his thing, ask questions. I hope if you haven't yet, you'll have a chance to actually talk to him. So his work is great. What I've learned the last couple of days, he's a very interesting fellow. I've learned not just related to his research as academics. We've talked about everything from growing basil to logistics to learning. So if you haven't had a chance to shake his hand, come up and meet him afterwards. I mean, at some point he does need to get back to them, but he's a very approachable person. I think you're going to learn a lot, not just in what he has to say now, but just talk to him in person. So he's going to talk, this is a little more specific to higher education. So when he was telling me, I said, let's do a little more broad thing, and then this is definitely related to what we do here. We're going to talk about challenges and opportunities with AI for trust in higher education, impacts on admissions, pedagogy, student workforce. So basically all the things that make a university run. So we'll let him have it. There'll be time for questions afterwards. At some point, if we have too many questions, we'll kind of close it down so people can leave, but definitely hang around. It'll be worth your time.
Thank you so much. So one of the things that I'm going to do, because a lot of you are students, is I want to make this relevant to you as well, because a lot of you are undergraduates, which means many of you are going to go on to advanced higher education. So it's important to be aware of the admissions processes and what we're going through and what we're going to put you through in the future as we have to deal with trust issues in the admissions process for graduate school. I've been to graduate school a lot, and every process I've ever gone through has been a little bit different, and it's always been kind of unpleasant. It's often been unorganized and difficult, and there's been a lack of communication, and you send your stuff off and wait for months and you never hear anything from anybody, and you're afraid you're not going to get admitted, and then all of a sudden, 2 weeks before the semester starts, you get a letter saying that you're admitted, and you missed new student orientation that took place a month ago, and you have to enroll in classes that are starting in 2 weeks, and they give you no directions on how to do it, and then you're desperately calling somebody in the office, and they're overwhelmed, they don't have time to answer your questions. And so admissions is hard. Running programs is hard. And I want you to have empathy for the staff that have to deal with this, because one of the other things about higher ed is we have tremendous staff turnover in higher ed. Somebody comes in, they learn just enough to be able to go on to the next position. They either move within the university, or they go to another university that are paid better, or they feel like it's better organized and it's a better position. And then they leave it as it was, and it's disorganized again. It constantly is going from order to chaos, order to chaos, order to chaos. And my role, beyond being a professor, is the Learning Technologies and PhD director. I run our undergraduate program at times. I was the director of the master's program for 8 years. And I have a degree in operations management, which means calendaring, scheduling, building operations plans in order to organize and schedule all this stuff. But every time I leave a position, the new person comes in, they don't have that degree, and everything collapses. So I just started this position with PhD in January. I have been chairing an insane number of dissertations for years. I chaired number 78 at the end of February. I will be chairing another 2 before the end of the semester, and I have sat on more than 150 dissertation committees across the university in multiple departments. So I know a little bit about PhD stuff. But now I am tasked with admissions. And our admissions process is a mess, because we have 3 new staff we've never done it before, ever. And there's been no direction. So my job is to attract and accept highly qualified students that can be successful in a 4 to 5 year distance or residential PhD program. That also means that I have to evaluate a huge number of applications. One of the things we've been having a challenge with is, because we had no real fixed process for a while, we weren't really responsive to students, so we were getting a limited number of applications the last few years, especially due to COVID. So we were getting 7 to 10 to 12, maybe 15 a year. Well, we were responsive this time, and we had 175 applications. And we have to evaluate all of those. So what I'm gonna talk to you about is this little challenge that we have that AI might be able to help with. So this is actually focused on an undergrad student because it was brought to me, this problem, 2 weeks ago, that we have a very large number of applicants to our bachelor's program. And we have one person evaluating all of these students. And she also has to do her job as an assistant professor. It's a lot of work. So let's say we have this student, Jacob Suzuki. With his demographics, he's 17 years old. He's from Irvine, California, which is where one of our great game people is. And went to Northwood High School, has a 3.4 GPA. This is a very strong student for a UNT undergrad. He was in the marching band, esports competitor, student council secretary. He has very strong coding skills. Excellent student overall for UNT. He's not going to go to UT Austin. He's not going to go to Harvard, but for UNT, he's a pretty competitive student. What he wants to do is business bachelor's, esports marketing major, maybe an accounting minor, and he wants to march in the UNT marching band. He's a trombone player. And then he wants to be on the esports team and be a varsity. Very cool. This is all stuff that's attractive to us as a university. And we get Jacob's application letter. It's written very well. I know it's a little small to read. I'm excited to apply to the University of North Texas and thrilled about the opportunity to be part of the university's esports marketing program. As a student who has excelled in academics, extracurriculars, and competitive esports tournaments, I'm confident that I will make a valuable contribution to the university community. And then much more information. Well-written, well-structured, good letter. Kind of letter that we like to see from students who are applying to programs. Better than a lot of our doctoral program letters that we've been getting lately. So the perceived problem that I have been presented with is how do I evaluate a large number of applicants like Jacob's? We will often get some that are similar, 3.4, 3.5, 3.2, similar backgrounds. How do we discriminate? How do we choose who's going to come in the program? So I gave ChatGPT a prompt. Rather than me just having to figure this out on my own, let's use the tool for what the tool's good for. Let's have it go out basically and search for the best possible approach to solving my problem. So here's my prompt. I have 179 applicants for 5 open undergraduate seats, and most of the letters are similar to each other. I need to fill these seats in the next 2 weeks and have only a few hours to review the applicants. What is the approach I should take? This is a good use of an AI tool, is to get this. Given the large number of applicants and limited time available, it may be difficult to do this. So number 1, create a checklist of the essential qualifications you're looking for. These could include academic performance, coursework, curricular activities, work experience. Number 2, skim through each application quickly. Look for keywords that match your checklist. You may also use software tools to extract text, data mining. 3, rank the applications based on how well they match your checklist. 4, set aside the applications that do not meet minimum requirements. Focus on the remainder. Read through those carefully. Then look at personal statements and letters of rep. Consider conducting a short phone or video interview with top candidates. Finally, make your selections based on the overall fit of the candidate's program. By following these steps, it should work. I liked this recommendation because it matched exactly with the new plan that I put in place for evaluating doctoral students for our program that's going into place for next year. This is almost exactly what, in my brain, I would do, which is fantastic. So this gives me confirmation from ChatGPT, from all available relevant sources, that this is a good approach to implement for admissions. So what are these positive outcomes from using the AI? Strong optimization approach for evaluating program applicants. Should give me the best applicants for a limited number of seats. Could be used with job applicants out in the real world once they get out. Fantastic approach. And it should increase trust in the evaluation process because I can disclose to candidates how they're being evaluated. It's a very clear set of criteria, and they know they're being judged fairly, which is something we need to have in our admissions process, that each of you is treated fairly. Now, what's the real problem? Jacob Suzuki is not a real person. I generated him, I made him using a bunch of other AI tools. I put in some criteria to describe the fictional person of Jacob Suzuki, just made some descriptions. And some of the descriptions came from conversations that I had with you over the last couple of days about your experiences in the real world. Part of the reason for that was I could engender empathy from people in the audience about this person because you could see yourself in him. So I can use AI for some pretty bad things if I want to, including in the admissions process. And increasingly, we're starting to see stuff from students that they didn't make. These are not real representations of them. And that makes it very hard to determine if we should admit people. So one of the things that we also have an issue with is competition. Anybody heard of the demographic cliff? So about 20 years ago, people stopped having kids in the United States. Couldn't afford to have them, whatever the reasons were. And so we are now going to have a lot of trouble replacing our current students with new students because there just aren't enough. There weren't enough births 20 years ago for us to fill seats in universities. So the competition for the few remaining students is just going to be higher and higher and higher. Now, if I'm a university that isn't super ethical, I'm going to generate a ton of fictional students and send them to other universities and overwhelm them with those students that I know are fictional so that I'm getting the best students so that I can compete more. This is a tactic that businesses actually use now against their competitors for hiring. Have y'all heard of ghost positions? People are posting ghost positions so that they'll get tons and tons of applicants so that it looks like they are a healthy company. And then they will create fictional applications to other companies in order to waste their time with hiring, and then the person accepts the position and they disappear because they were never real to start with. This is a problem because universities are also companies. And at a certain point, there are going to be some folks who aren't super ethical, and that's going to become a problem. So any student could create a fictional material. I know that people fudge some things on their resumes and things like that from time to time. Everybody's done it at some point. I think when I was 16, I put down that I had worked at Hardee's for 2 months longer than I had really worked there because I wanted this job at a butcher shop, and then found out that salmonella is a really bad thing when I got that job. But that fiction creates these falsehoods, and then we make a decision to admit based on the falsehood, and then the student's a bad fit. They have a bad experience, we have a bad experience, and there's no success for anyone. And that's not what we want. We want everybody to be successful. But if these AI tools are implemented in a negative way, this can do us harm. So, same thing with employers. We have to have some trust and transparency. And AI, the biggest problem with it is it breaks trust in the processes and the systems we currently have. We are relying on people to be honest about things. And it makes it very easy to be dishonest with these tools. So where did Jacob come from? You saw the picture of Jacob before? That's my son, Luke. I just used Bria.ai, started with Luke, changed his age from 13 to 17 years old, changed his hair color from dirty blonde brown, changed his face to Asian model, and then a different model that they had in there. And now we've got wearing the same jacket. That's about the main similarity between those two folks. Do you know how long this took me to do? 3 minutes. AI makes it easy to do bad things. That's one of my biggest concerns as somebody who writes about and has developed an ethics framework for education. It makes it way too easy to be unethical, way too easy to do bad things. And sometimes we do bad things not because we're bad people, but because we don't have enough time to do it well, or it's just not exactly the right fit, so I have to fudge things, whatever the person's reason is. But it creates a lot of distrust in all of our systems, whether it's academic or business. It's just something we have to be aware of. So where did Jacob's information come from? I wrote on the right, generated strong University of North Texas esports marketing program, college 2-page long application letter for a 17-year-old high school student named Jacob Suzuki from Irvine, California. I just created all that information, dumped it in ChatGPT. It wrote me a beautifully written letter. So what are the global challenges according to ChatGPT? Yesterday I talked about the challenges for the next 50 years. So I decided to run the same prompt through ChatGPT to see what it thought. So what are the potential benefits? Well, increased automation, make our lives easier. That's what tools are for, generally, is to allow us to do something a little more easily than we could do with what we already have, or just by ourselves. One of the things, Michael Melinda, one of my professors many years ago in Indiana, he's one of the people who constantly writes the definitions of technology in our field and has for like 60 years. Now Mike is a little man who makes fun of himself for looking a little bit like a monkey. And so to teach us what technology was, he had a coat rack with apples hanging from it over in the corner. And he came in and he picked up a stick that he had brought from outside. And he walked over and got on his knees and started smacking at the apple with the stick until it fell. That's a technology. That is how he first defined technology for us. The stick is a tool that allows us to do something, extends our reach a little bit easier. The issue with the AI tools is it makes it too easy to do almost anything. Don't know how to write your code in Python? Tell ChatGPT what you want to do. It will generate the code for you. Did you do the work? No. ChatGPT did the work. So then you learn that you can rely on ChatGPT. One of my doctoral students, who was actually one of Dr. Darby's undergrad students, I believe, at the Guildhall once upon a time, told me just last week, he works for Bell Helicopter. They can't get programmers who actually know how to program anymore. They can look up in ChatGPT, or they can use Python to use other GPT tools to get the code written for them. But they can't explain it. They can't fix it. They don't know how to do anything. And so they're short right now, something like 45, 46 programmers, I think he said last week, across Bell Helicopter. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm terrified of helicopters. I don't like heights a whole bunch. But I think it's pretty scary that a helicopter company can't hire qualified software engineers because they're overly reliant on GPT tools. Y'all, many people, including some people in my family, think that GPT just magically appeared in January. This has been going on for like 5, 6, 7 years, and programmers knew where all this stuff was for a very long time. And so the problem is filtering out through education and business in a way that's pretty scary. So this creates a big problem for us. Now, we talked a little bit about improved healthcare. This is a great thing that it can do because it can attend without getting tired to large amounts of data like radiological images, and it can detect cancer much more quickly than we can as humans. Maybe we can do personalized learning, the Duolingo thing, what he thinks can happen, maybe, I don't know. I am skeptical of that because humans are adaptation machines, so just because something worked once doesn't mean it will ever work again for any other humans in the future. I have to rewrite every one of my classes every single semester because it's a different group with different expectations, different needs, and they're starting at a different place. So what I did last time is not necessarily going to work next time. I don't know that AI is going to be able to adapt that way. So that leaves a place for humans. Smarter cities, this is actually a big deal. Anybody live in a neighborhood where the LED lights dim when they're not in use on the street, and then when somebody drives by, they light up? That's what they're talking about with this, is it can control those things so it has lower energy use. Fantastic use. And then improved communication. can improve language translation, interpretation. Many of you use Google Translate, things like that. That can be helpful. But challenges, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, job displacement. As there's more and more AI, fewer and fewer jobs. For higher ed, that's a problem because we train people for work for specific jobs, and if those jobs aren't there, why do people go to college? Bias and discrimination, talked about that a little bit yesterday too. If you teach an AI to be biased just by interacting with you, it will adopt your biases. That's pretty scary. Privacy and security, AI doesn't really notice security. It just bypasses all of those things and it will pull things that are supposed to be private. A lot of your data that's out there on the internet that you don't even know is there, it's pulling from and using without your permission. And then control and accountability. We talked about supervised and unsupervised yesterday. There's a very strong push from almost everyone in the AI community to shift from supervised, which is much more labor intensive but very transparent. I have to approve every decision the AI makes, to unsupervised, which is the black box type where we don't know why it's making its decisions. Because it's easier. That's what their entire reasoning is. This is easier. It's less labor intensive for the human. But we also don't know why anything happened. So this is an issue that we talk about, especially in learning technologies and online learning, is the transactional distance problem. We've all played the game of telephone, whisper in somebody's ear, and by the time it gets to the other end, it's nonsense. The further away we are from someone else, especially when we're teaching and learning, the more likely we are to be misunderstood. And the further away we are from someone else, the more we distrust them. One of the biggest challenges I've had in my courses over the years is basically reports from students that when they don't have regular interactions with each other, face-to-face or through synchronous means, they stop viewing the other person on the other end as human. They're just an impediment to getting what they want. So the disagreements that they have lead to what we used to call flame wars. And they would act without decorum, shouting profanity at each other about topics in the discussion forums, because that transactional distance makes them view the other as less human. And with AI, this removes our human contact more and more and more and more because we're able to just get the things we need or want without having to put forth a lot of effort. And so adding that transparency lack with the black box models makes it much harder for us to trust. And everything in our society is built on trust. It's built on social norms about how we treat each other. Machines don't have those. So with a lot of the work that we are doing now taking place at a distance, it's harder and harder to trust each other. And that creates more and more problems, and AI will exacerbate that going forward. So things when we talk about trust are, do I trust another person to tell the truth? So my learning theory comes from this dude named Jürgen Habermas from Germany who wrote all of his stuff in German, and it's translated and very hard to understand. But when we talk about this, one of the first things that we say to each other is, I am claiming to you that I am telling the truth. And I need you to view me as telling the truth. That is the first claim all communication makes. And the other person has to accept that I am telling the truth, or we can't go any further. AI makes it much harder to decide whether or not that person is telling the truth because there are so many other things that could have influenced what you're saying. So a lot of the time you have to look at what are their sources of evidence. This is a big thing for me as a PhD instructor. The thing that my students get annoyed with, and I know Dr. Darby probably got annoyed with, is who says? Cite sources. And as Dr. Darby can also attest, my OCD makes me line edit every document that I get to the point where I changed like 99% of the words on some of them because people aren't providing evidence for what they're saying. So I am constantly pushing for that source of evidence because Having grown up in Detroit, moved a lot, and been a middle school teacher, I trust no one. So some of this is also relying on our past experience with the person. Have they told me the truth in the past? Are their motives and information sources transparent? Can I trust them? And then we have the same question about the AI. Can I trust the AI to tell me the truth? What are the sources of information? If it's an unsupervised model and it's a black box, I don't know those things. Have they told me the truth in the past? Well, if we experience an AI long enough, we can look at other sources to determine if they're consistently telling us the truth. So maybe we can learn to trust them. Are their motives and information sources transparent? Same thing. The motives of an AI are not neutral. The motives of an AI were the intentions of the person that programmed it. We don't see it, but that person is present in the program. And so the question comes back to the top part, can I trust that person? And if it's not clear who that person is, we can't trust the AI. So trust is trust, whether it's with human or machines. This is the thing you always need to come back to. These machines are based on cognitive science. We are trying to emulate what a human does behaviorally based on what we think human cognition is. The worst part, though, is I have been a cognitive scientist for 20 years. We barely understand the brain in human beings, but we're trying to build models of it with artificial intelligence. So much of what we're building is an alien intelligence. It is as different from you and I as we are from a rock. There is very little in common between that AI and you. It does not think the way that you do. It does not have the values that you do. It doesn't have the limitations that you do. So this scholar, B.N. Kim, recently said, because of that, we need to study AI like it is an alien, like we're Area 51 dissecting a gray alien with big eyes and trying to figure out how it works, because it is that different from us. Because we made it, and then it evolved on its own, and we have no idea in what ways it did so, and it's not even able to really tell us how. So, because it has no soul, it's not human, it is not going to react to you the way that it reacts, or that we react to each other. So, because it can't empathize and it doesn't have our limits, eventually that's going to become a problem, and especially with trust. So this is the issue that I have with the human part and trust. We're using AI instead of biased humans. This is what everybody says. We're going to use this neutral technology and it's going to get rid of human bias out of the decision-making process. And they say, what did you train the AI on? What did you train the AI on? We don't know. And we started in a place and then it continues on its own and it keeps learning and eventually we have no idea how it got where it is. And it is just as biased as the person who started the training to start with. All of our biases were present in the very question we started with. This is what I teach all of my qualitative research students. Because they're like, oh, I like quantitative more because quantitative is objective. It's just statistics. One of the worst things universities ever did is they dropped the word inferential from the beginning of inferential statistics in all of our classes. Making inferences means you're making guesses. Your quantitative data is just as biased as any qualitative data is. It's just less transparent in the bias. What does AI run on? Quantitative data. Filled with all of the biases of the people who asked the questions to start with. So what does this mean for classrooms and pedagogy? The biggest issue that I have now is, can I trust the work that was submitted to me? I'm sure all of the faculty in the room feel the same way. I'm sure we've all received ChatGPT stuff and not even realized it. Because I had faculty in my department who didn't know ChatGPT existed until 2 weeks ago. Had no idea. So we then have this concern as to whether students are going to move through a program using AI-generated work, plagiarized work, and I've had this problem well before ChatGPT existed. So if I have a student who's going through comprehensive exams in their master's or PhD, and all of the work that they've provided has been plagiarized or AI generated, they won't learn anything. And then they get a dissertation, they don't know how to write, they don't know how to synthesize, they don't know how to do any sort of research, and then they're going to fail out at that point. So now we have loss of retention. So we failed from the admissions all the way through the coursework. One of the other issues that we have, and I've had this for many, many, many years, is that a lot of faculty and students are unwilling to accept new technologies, and some are way too trusting of new technologies. They do not question them at all. They're like, oh, it's out on the internet. It must be fine. No one would put things on the internet that aren't true. Anybody know what reification is? It's a complex word that just means we write stuff down. Do you know what human brains do when they see something that has been reified? They automatically believe it's true. This is a big problem in cognitive science. We trust that it has been written down, whether in digital form or textual form on a piece of paper, it's true. And we often don't challenge it. And then it creates problems when it is untrue for us to be able to break someone of the notion that that thing is true and to actually learn new true things. AI generates everything in text. Tell you a very quick story. When I was a graduate student in Indiana, we were building an educational game, and it was related to science education. It included trying to teach fourth graders about things like turbidity and pH and all of these super high level, graduate level terms related to river water. And they were supposed to do all these experiments, and it's gonna be fantastic. Problem was, we had a science education person who didn't really understand the concepts. And so we built into the game things that were wrong. And because it was written down and they were fourth graders, they trusted us that it would be correct, and they learned the wrong things. Do you know what it took to break them of that? Because it only took 4 days to teach them the wrong thing. You know how long it took to fix it? 6 months. And the teacher had to weekly reteach the new concepts and had to have physical manipulatives to demonstrate the properties to fix what we broke with a digital tool. So this becomes super problematic with AI and everything else. One of the other issues that we're starting to have, some of the faculty are telling me that they're generating their course materials using AI. It's not their work, but they're being paid for it. That's going to be a bigger problem going forward. And then the other issue, and this was actually brought up yesterday, and I thought it was a good point, does the use of proctoring or plagiarism, AIs like Turnitin, communicate that we don't trust students? And a lot of the time, those tools don't work, and students are accused of doing things they didn't do. So it creates a bigger trust problem in the classroom over time because the tools are not as effective as they say. So we're doing research right now. One of my doctoral students, Kim Greta-Wald, and I, on faculty trust with AI. And what we found right now is a continuum across the 145 participants where the first person we actually did an interview with is a community college professor who is overwhelmed, teaches like 11 classes a semester, and when we asked about her trust of these AI tools, she said, sure, they wouldn't put them on the internet if they weren't right. I'm sure they're fine. And then she described 3 different AI tools that she was using, and she never questioned any of them. And one of them is known to have very serious problems. So we have the folks on the complete trust end, and then we have some who are like, okay, I'm going to do my research to make sure that this is actually an okay tool to use. And then we have some who are willing to play with it and try it, but I'm not going to integrate it into my classroom. I need to make sure that I'm not going to hurt my students first. And it could take them 2-3 years before they're even willing to integrate it into anything. And then finally, we have no trust. We have some faculty who, if it says AI, they won't touch it because they are very concerned about a lot of the concerns that we've just been talking about. And so I actually have faculty who are turning back to paper and pencil. They are that worried about technology right now. So another study that came out last year from Nazaretsky found that trust with K-12 teachers, and I know some of you are studying to be teachers, found that trust in these AI tools could be improved with training about AI and what it is and how we use it, and to make sure that teachers have freedom of choice to whether or not to use it. The problem with this study was the researchers' assumption was that we should be making everyone use AI. And so their purpose was to find ways to force it into classrooms and to reduce resistance to its use without questioning whether or not it should be used at all. And this is a problem with ed tech researchers more broadly. We want you to use our stuff, so we don't question whether or not it's ethical or even effective. So anytime, especially those of you going on to teaching, are asked to use a tool, ask why. Learn as much as you can about whether or not you're going to use it before you implement it, because you don't want to hurt your kids. Now there's another big issue that's come up, and it's not necessarily, I guess it's more of a larger social trust issue, which is that since the introduction of heavy-duty technologies about 20 years ago, is we're seeing neurological regression in human beings. There's a lot of evidence of this. So this guy Schachter last year did a big meta-analysis, and he found that excessive technology use impacts our memory in really serious ways. Transience, we are forgetting things over time much more quickly. We cannot retain information the way that we did even 10 years ago. We have a lot more absent-mindedness. We have so much technology going on all the time and so much pointed at our attention that we cannot focus. Misattribution. We are seeing bad data sources and attributing things to the wrong place. We are not able to have our brains function in a way that retains information properly. And then suggestibility. We are more susceptible now than we've ever been to false memories being implanted. People are going on the internet and putting things on like, hey, do you remember when this event happened? And then they're putting out like multiple things generated by AI about events that never occurred. And they're so believable that people will think that it happened. And they've been doing research on this and showing that we'll accept stuff like that as long as it's written down and there's enough evidence. So, Small in 2020 found that with a lot of this technology use, we're getting a lot more ADHD symptoms, which is not great for learning. Emotional and social intelligence continues to drop because the technology is in the way of our relationships with face-to-face human beings. A lot of technology addiction. I actually had a friend who played World of Warcraft so much back from 2006. So, and this is, I feel bad about it. I got him into World of Warcraft because I couldn't sleep because my daughter had really severe acid reflux when she was born. So I was up all night playing World of Warcraft. So I got him into it, and he used to make fun of me for playing it. He lost 3 different jobs as a lawyer because he couldn't stop playing World of Warcraft. So this is no joke. He's just one example of many. There's a lot of social isolation. We're staring at a screen. We're not really interacting with human beings. We're just looking at Instagram posts. Impaired brain development. They're actually seeing the brain is not developing properly the more that we interact with technology. Partly because we're more and more reliant on it. And we're seeing a lot more disrupted sleep patterns. People are staring at a screen, it disrupts their sleep. So from a learning and performance standpoint, this will affect you in school, and it'll affect you at work. This is my big concern. Those of you who are old enough to remember this version of the movie, Planet of the Apes, humans have regressed over time. And part of that, some of the backstory in some of the books, was that they had gotten so addicted to technology and it had become such a crutch to them that they didn't need to do anything for themselves, and they slowly devolved. This is actually a genuine concern among cognitive scientists right now. So, how do we fix it? Well, if we want to rebuild trust in the admissions process, we can't keep having this big transactional distance. We're going to have to shift how we evaluate the people that we admit. We've had a lot of applications, so we've shifted to technology. Technology puts more distance between us, and we can't necessarily trust what we're getting, and it's getting worse. So we may have to do multi-stage applicant reviews. We may have to start pre-screening applicants and doing Zoom calls with them and having larger admissions teams to do that. We may have to have committee application process with a longer Zoom to really see if a student can maybe apply thinking in meaningful ways and do some of the things they said they could do on their application. We may start to have more on-campus interviews. We've all done orientation. I had my orientation at Western Michigan University in the summer of 1992. And that was basically, here's where the bookstore is. Over here is where the gym is. They didn't do anything to determine if we belong there. But we may have to start looking at things like using visits to help vet students to make sure that they actually belong in school. We may have to, during that time, request in-person writing samples because AI makes it so we can't trust the writing samples. We may have to watch them write, which is not a great thing, but this is a possible thing. And then build some sort of an applicant review process into those campus visits. It's going to be much more labor intensive in order to build trust going forward with admissions because these tools are making it harder to trust. One other thing we can do is using AI for plagiarism detection. It's what we're doing now. It doesn't work very well. But it's a Band-Aid for a little while. People are going to cheat. They just will. So technology is a thing that people will always try to get around. So the more we try to do this, the AI is just going to get better and better and better. So no matter how much better Turnitin gets, people will figure out ways around it. Now, in terms of workforce transition from college, we need much more authentic learning activities so that people can show what they know so that it's applied and in a way that they can demonstrate to employers so that the employers will trust us. We need projects that show the real world. We need people who are teaching who have real world experience. We need to work with corporate partners to help build trust relationships with them. We are a company, we have this idea called business to business. We're a business that needs to build business relationships with other businesses in order to help our students transition. We need to teach students how to solve problems. They need to engage in critical thinking because in the future with AI and everything else, it's not going to be about how much information you acquired. It's about whether or not you can ask the right questions to solve problems. It's about thinking in complex ways to solve problems. If we keep teaching for just content, 10 years from now, everything you learn now is going to be completely useless. You need to know how to think, not what to think. We also need much more authentic assessments. Tests done in Canvas or whatever else, they don't teach you to problem solve. It's just information acquisition to see if you acquired this information. And most of them are terrible because most faculty aren't taught how to design tests, which is not great. But if we instead use formative assessments to cycle feedback through on students' performance all the way through, that's what you get when you're at work, so that you can monitor your performance. And that way you're better able to transition. Summative assessments should have to be defensible. Most of the time you turn in a paper and they're like, good work, checked your grammar, fine. That is not the same as defending your solution. That's a lot harder. So if all of those solutions can then go to a portfolio, that's what employers want to see. This is the work I can do, and we need a lot more of that. And then last part on this, and I'm almost done, is if you want to do distance education, which is a problem for my university right now, we have a ton of online courses. Most of them are terrible. And I say this as someone who just published in distance education last year. They're terrible. We have no strategy for implementing this stuff. It's a completely haphazard approach. You have to design distance education programs with intention. You have to have experts who know how to design properly. You have to follow a real, clear process that's transparent. And you need to make sure that students are engaged throughout course content. I have spent 20 years teaching online. You know what I never do now? Discussion forums. Not ever. You cannot do distance education well with asynchronous at all. Students will do the bare minimum to fill in the discussion posts and learn nothing. You have to stay in constant contact with your students for them to be successful in online settings. They will just disappear otherwise. Just like when we have large lecture halls. You got 300 students in a lecture hall, you have no idea who's there. I took oceanography when I was an undergrad. I went to class 3 times. They never took attendance. I learned nothing, but I could pass the tests. That's not what we want for our students. So if we're going to do anything like this, we need to have strong development, professional development for the teachers and the students. How many of you had to take a digital literacy class when you were in high school? You know why you don't have to do that? Because the state of Texas eliminated the requirement in 2011. Do you know what we're seeing in digital literacy according to the dissertation my student's about to defend? Our students have almost no digital literacy skills now. If you're going to be successful in the workforce, you have to have those. So we're going to have to start with digital literacy at the beginning. And we have to train all of our faculty to have digital literacy skills. And everybody needs to be on the same page. Course development's expensive. I have 2 doctoral students who graduated from our program. One is in charge of learning for Moodle, the learning management system. Another has a company that does instructional design called iDesign. Do you know how much they charge for a simple course development in online? $50,000. If you want any level of complexity, it's going to go $150,000. They've actually charged a couple of places lately $1.5 million for complex adaptive course development. Doing online is extraordinarily hard, it's very expensive, and it requires a ton of expertise. So when you all go out to grad school, look to see if that grad school has that expertise. Otherwise, it might not go well. And also make sure, if you're developing it locally, that you have review process every 3 years, because otherwise it's that 20-year-old syllabus that the business professor's been teaching since the 90s. So to conclude, AI tools are new, but they're a labor savings technology. It's fantastic. It can help with our tasks. As the technologies continue to become more problematic, we may have to go back to more analog approaches, more hands-on approaches in order to build trust. I don't like having to say that as a technology person, but AI is breaking this. So if we're going to restore trust in admissions, classroom, workforce transitions, we're probably going to have to restructure how we teach, how people learn, and what college looks like. That was the end, but this is the AI tool resource that I provided yesterday, if any of you wants that. What questions do you have? You got 3 minutes. Yes?
What would be the first step
For what?
for just moving into moving pieces and stuff? So if you have to take a first step into moving toward the future where you know there's change coming, where you have to work with AI, or you want to get your campus heading in the right direction to address it, what's the first step?
Research. First thing is you need a group that has high expertise in what AI is and how it is currently or likely to impact your local campus. So from a management strategy standpoint, first thing you have to know is also what your goals are for AI, for online learning, for technology more broadly. Then you need to know what your organizational structure is in terms of what the supports are from human resources perspectives, technological resources, and how they fit to that. And then what disruptions AI is likely to make to each of those components. And then you build an operations plan that links straight line down from strategy through organization through operations at every level. And if you would like to read more, I have an article about that. So internal evaluation and figuring out who you are, what you are, and what you want to do, that's the first step. Yes, sir.
Not exactly sure what everyone else.
That's okay. I'm not sure we know enough about AI to know what that's yet.
How do you see higher ed? Very broad. How do you see the higher students?
I can give you an emotional response and I can give you a mathematical forecasting response based on regression analysis from operations management, because I've done both. So I love higher ed. I've always loved higher ed. My father's retired Associate Vice Chancellor from the University of Houston for research and intellectual property. 7 people in my family have PhDs. They all taught at universities. I care very much about higher ed. I think it's important. I am afraid that the math is not in favor of higher ed. I am afraid that the politics is not in favor of higher ed. I am afraid that the corporations are not in favor of higher ed. The number of students needed to keep universities running at the rate that they're running now mathematically is impossible in the next 10 years. Every university in the United States, and we've already seen it, we already have evidence in Ohio, we have evidence in Pennsylvania, we have evidence in Indiana. Every one of them has decreased students by 30 to 50%. They are laying off faculty. They are far more expensive because the smaller university gets, the more expensive it is. It's going to be harder and harder. The competition is going to get worse and worse. Anybody know how many public universities there are in Texas? 36. Every one of those in the business who is competing for one thing, students. That's how they make their money. We have universities like Texas A&M, Texarkana that have about 1,100 students. Texarkana is going to have to merge with someone else in the next 2 to 3 years to survive. There's not enough students for it to continue to function. Even a university like North Texas, where I work, we're huge, 44,000 students, but we're part of a tiny system. At some point, probably in the next 10 years, we'll wind up having to merge with A&M or UT Austin so that the cost of higher ed can be distributed across the system instead of just within independent campuses. So the costs are going to continue to skyrocket. The competition is going to get much, much harder. And I've already seen it. So this is the other thing about my father that I mentioned before that I don't love. So my dad was a corporate guy before he went into higher ed in '99. Military corporate guy specifically. And so he's also autistic, and for him, everything is pure optimization. Pure optimization. And so he came up with an idea for the president of the University of Houston, was a business professor back then, in order to help with the financial problem U of H was having. And he said, the problem is we don't charge enough in tuition. That was what he came down to. He looked at everything and came down to, we are not allowed by state law to charge what we want for tuition in order to do all the things we want to do. So what we need to do is go to the legislature and convince them to deregulate tuition. So he was also a lobbyist for the University of Houston, and he went there and convincingly explained to the legislature why they should deregulate tuition. So when I was at University of Houston doing my master's in the 90s, my entire degree cost $4,500. Doing a master's at University of Houston now costs about $47,000. Because my father thought it was a good idea to deregulate tuition. So we have that problem, and then for smaller schools like y'all's, you're still competing against big public schools, and that has created tuition issues in that space. It's not really even the AI issue at this point, it's that just structurally the state of Texas higher ed system is completely broken. I spent 10 years studying this, so I know too much. And I've done all the forecasting, and what it looks like is, in terms of student enrollments over the next 10 years, there's just nobody. My wife is having a baby in October. I'm going to be one of the few bright shining points in 20 years when my kid goes to college. But at that point, every nurse is going to be just begging me to send my kid to school there because there's going to be so much competition. So they thought that that was going to stop. So the demographic cliff happened because of the 2008, 2009, 10 recession. And they're like, oh, we'll recover from that. And then we never recovered. So when we think about AI, it's a technology. But if we're going to study strategically, we have to look at technological systems, legal systems, political systems, economic systems, social systems. All of these parts all interact as a system, and they all influence each other. As a systems guy, I can tell you, we too often focus on one layer, and then we don't understand the problem. We have to look at every layer and see how they interact with each other. Just like an AI and a machine, all of those pieces fit together. So the answer is not positive. Again, I said yesterday, economics is not the dismal science, systems thinking is, but what it does for me is it helps me prepare. It helps me think about how I'm going to compete for students. It helps me think about how I'm going to retain students so that we can continue to be as successful as we can be for as long as possible. But we are going to have to do everything better. And we're going to have to do less of everything. We've been promising students insane things for 20 years. Insane things. If you want to see the craziest building you've ever seen at a university, go look at the mean green dorm at University of North Texas. This place is a palace. This place is insane. It is so luxurious. It has everything a student could ever imagine. It's across from the business building, which also looks very beautiful, but I was a graduate student there while still a full professor. 2 months after it opened, and the door on the bathroom, the handle came off of my hand and I got trapped in there for an hour and a half. So they're beautiful, but we're also not building anything very well, because going back to the engineering problem, if we're copying everything from a GPT, we don't really know what we're doing. So we're going to have to do everything much cheaper. The dorm that I lived in when I was an undergrad, cinder block, we were lucky to have heats. Like, that's what dorms for undergrads were back then, and that's why tuition was cheaper. Now everything's luxurious, and everybody's expectations are just going to have to get lower, I think, if higher ed's going to survive. So I know it's not a positive outcome, but I'm a realist, unfortunately, and reality is not super pleasant. Other thoughts and questions? I know we're at the end here. Yes.
So if I'm about to graduate college and go apply for a job or graduate school, what can I do with my application materials to show them I really am the greatest applicant versus a made-up portion?
So this is actually the thing that some of our past applicants are doing right now in the doctoral program, and I think it's brilliant. They're contacting individual faculty in the department before they even submit their materials, and they're interviewing us. They are talking to us to find out if they're a good fit. They are introducing themselves. They are making that trust relationship evident before they even apply. And they're a known quantity. The whole thing with admissions is you want to reduce risk that someone is going to be a bad fit and they're going to fail out of the university and you're going to lose retention. So you want to build everything into those trust relationships to reduce risk of loss. Trust relationships and building those human relationships will reduce that risk. I study a lot of risk management stuff, and that's what all of it is. Most of our risk problems now come from technology. Like door handles.
All right, let's thank him.